Beneath the bustling streets of Portland, Oregon, lies a dark and eerie reminder of the city's past. The Shanghai Tunnels. Once used to smuggle unsuspecting victims into forced labor, these underground passages now serve as a historical attraction, drawing curious tourists eager for a taste of the supernatural. Some leave with only ghost stories to tell. Others leave with something far worse. The group gathered at the entrance of the tunnels, their excited chatter filling the narrow passageway. Their tour guide, an older man with a deep, steady voice, recounted the grim history of the tunnels. "This was once a place of nightmares," he said, his flashlight casting long shadows along the damp walls. "Men were drugged, kidnapped, and dragged through these very tunnels, only to wake up aboard ships bound for months at sea. Many never returned." His voice lowered. "And some say their spirits never left." Despite the unsettling tales, the group pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the hollow corridors. The air grew colder as they descended further, a musty scent of decay clinging to the walls. The guide pointed to a rusted iron gate. Beyond this point, many men were held in cages before being taken away. Some claimed to hear their cries even now. A young couple, Ethan and Claire, exchanged uneasy glances. They were skeptical about ghosts, but something about the tunnels made them feel watched, as if unseen eyes lurked just beyond the flashlight's reach. As the group moved forward, Claire turned her head sharply. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Ethan. A faint whisper, like a breath against her ear, had sent a shiver down her spine. Ethan shook his head, but his grip on her hand tightened. The tour continued deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. The group reached a section where wooden trapdoors once led to the basements of unsuspecting taverns. Men would fall through, straight into the hands of their captors, the guide explained. "Imagine walking into a bar for a drink and waking up miles away at sea." A nervous chuckle spread through the group, but Claire's discomfort only grew. A sudden flicker of the lights made everyone stop. The bulbs hanging from the ceiling dimmed and then flickered wildly before plunging the tunnel into darkness. A woman in the group gasped. The guide muttered a curse and fumbled with his flashlight, but for several agonizing seconds, there was nothing but blackness. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, just ahead of them. Yet when the lights returned, the corridor was empty. Ethan and Claire had fallen behind slightly, lingering at a junction where the tunnel split into two directions. "I don't like this," Claire muttered. "Let's catch up with the group." But as they turned, something was wrong. The passage they had just come from now stretched into darkness. No voices, no sign of the others. "Where did they go?" Ethan asked, his voice edged with unease. A whisper brushed against Claire's ear again. This time, it was clear. A man's voice, hollow and distant. "Run." Ethan grabbed her hand and took a step forward, but an icy grip clamped onto his wrist. He yanked away instinctively, but the sensation of fingers lingered, as if something unseen still held onto him. Claire turned in a frantic circle. Shadows shifted along the walls, darker than they should have been. A shuffling noise came from behind them, then ahead. Panic rose in her throat. "Ethan, we need to go. Now." They bolted in the direction they thought the group had gone, but the tunnel stretched endlessly. The harder they ran, the more the air around them thickened, pressing against them like unseen hands. Their breathing turned ragged, their footsteps muffled by something unnatural. Then, just as suddenly as they had been alone, they weren't. The tunnel ahead flickered back to life, revealing the tour group standing just a few feet away. Claire stumbled forward, gasping, but the others stared at them in confusion. "Where did you two go?" the guide asked, lowering his flashlight. "You disappeared." Ethan shook his head. "No, we were right behind you." The group murmured among themselves. A man checked his watch and frowned. "That's impossible. You've been gone for over an hour." A cold wave of dread washed over them. To Ethan and Claire, it had felt like minutes. 10, at most. The whispers, the shifting shadows, the unseen grip, They had been trapped in something beyond time, lost in a place where the past refused to die. As they climbed the stairs leading out of the tunnels, the weight pressing on their chests finally eased, but an uneasy feeling clung to them. The moment they reached the fresh air, Claire gasped, gripping her arm. A thin red scratch ran along her skin, as if invisible nails had traced a warning into her flesh. Ethan checked his own wrist, the place where he had felt the ghostly grip. A bruise was forming, dark and distinct. The guide watched them carefully. Some say the spirits here don't want to be forgotten. Sometimes they make sure you remember them. Neither Ethan nor Claire spoke, but as they walked away from the tunnels, both felt the same thing, a presence lingering just behind them, unseen but not gone. And when they turned to look, there was nothing there. The Villisca axe murder house stood eerily silent in the dimming light of the Iowa countryside. It was an unassuming white house, almost quaint, but its history was soaked in blood. On June 10, 1912, Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with their 4 children and 2 guests, were brutally murdered in their sleep. Their skulls had been crushed by an axe, the killer leaving behind a crime so horrific that it sent waves of fear through the town. No one was ever caught. No motive was ever determined. The house remained untouched by time, its walls still whispering the horrors of that night. A group of paranormal investigators arrived just before dusk, their van pulling into the gravel driveway. The house's owner, a local who rented it out for overnight stays, greeted them with a quiet warning. "People who stay here don't always leave the same," he said, handing them the keys. "Some leave with scratches. Some wake up in the night with things standing over them. Others, well, they don't talk about what they see." The team laughed nervously, brushing off his words. They had investigated haunted locations across the country, old asylums, abandoned hospitals, forgotten prisons. What made this one any different? As they stepped inside, the air grew thick and unmoving. Dust particles hung suspended in the dim light of their flashlights. The house smelled of old wood, decay, and something faintly metallic. They set up their equipment, EVP recorders, thermal cameras, EMF detectors, ready to catch whatever spirits still lurked in the shadows. Mark, the lead investigator, turned on the spirit box, the device scanning through radio frequencies rapidly. "If anyone is here," he called into the darkness, "can you give us a sign?" A burst of static. Silence. Then, 3 loud knocks from upstairs. The team froze. The house had been empty when they arrived. Mark turned to Sarah, who was gripping her thermal camera tightly. "Anything," he whispered. Sarah shook her head. "No heat signatures. But I feel something." They climbed the narrow staircase cautiously, the wood groaning beneath their steps. The upstairs bedrooms, where the children had slept, were eerily undisturbed. A single doll sat in the corner, its porcelain face cracked, its black eyes staring blankly forward. Then came the giggle, soft, faint, almost playful. Sarah gasped, turning the camera towards the sound. "Tell me someone else heard that." Jake, another investigator, nodded slowly. "It sounded like a little girl." Mark swallowed hard and turned to the spirit box again. "Who's here with us?" Static. Then a garbled voice, a whisper. "He's here." The 3 exchanged uneasy glances. "Who's here?" Mark pressed. The response was immediate. "The man with the axe." Sarah took a step back. The air was growing colder. The EMF detector in Jake's hand spiked violently, beeping frantically. The whispers grew louder, filling the room. Then, without warning, the door to the master bedroom slammed shut. Jake rushed forward, shoving against it. "It's locked." From inside, something heavy scraped across the floor. The sound was unmistakable, like an axe being dragged. Sarah's breathing quickened. "I don't like this," she muttered. "Something's wrong." Downstairs, another door slammed, then another. One by one, the house was sealing itself, trapping them inside. Mark pulled out his walkie-talkie to radio the rest of the team downstairs. Static. No response. "Time to go," Jake said, his voice tight. They rushed down the stairs, but as Mark grabbed the front door handle, it wouldn't turn. "It's locked." He gritted his teeth, pulling harder. Sarah tried the back door. It won't open either. Then came the whispers again. This time, closer, surrounding them. "You can't leave." Mark turned to Jake, but his friend had gone rigid, his face suddenly blank. "Jake," Mark called cautiously. Jake's eyes flickered, unfocused. His lips moved, but the words that came out weren't his own. "You can't leave," he whispered, his voice a distorted growl. Sarah gasped as Jake suddenly collapsed, his body hitting the wooden floor with a sickening thud. His limbs convulsed, his mouth twitching, as if something was speaking through him. Mark knelt beside him, shaking his shoulders. "Jake, snap out of it." Then, just as suddenly as it started, Jake went still. His eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his face. "What happened?" "You tell us," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "You weren't yourself." Before Jake could answer, the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath fogged in the air. The whispers turned into frantic murmurs, overlapping, surrounding them. And then, silence. The front door creaked open on its own. The team hesitated for only a second before bolting outside, gasping as they stumbled into the cold night air. They didn't stop running until they reached their van, slamming the doors shut behind them. None of them spoke. They drove in silence, stopping only when they were miles away. It was then that Jake lifted his sleeve, revealing deep red scratches along his arm. Scratches that hadn't been there before. Over the next few weeks, Jake's health began to decline. He suffered from unexplainable nightmares, waking up screaming about an axe swinging in the dark. His once strong body grew weak. Doctors found no medical reason for his condition. He avoided mirrors, claiming he saw something behind him whenever he looked. One night, months later, he woke to the familiar sound of soft giggles. His bedroom door creaked open on its own. In the moonlight, he saw it, a shadow standing at the foot of his bed, gripping an axe. Jake never spoke of what happened that night, but in the days that followed, his friends noticed something unsettling. He had changed. His once warm demeanor was gone, replaced by something distant, something cold. And sometimes, late at night, when he thought no one was listening, he could still hear the whisper, "You can't leave." The wind howled against the walls of the St. Augustine Lighthouse, its mournful wails blending with the crashing waves below. The storm had rolled in faster than expected, darkening the sky and sending sheets of rain pelting against the glass windows. Inside, Ethan Carter, the current lighthouse keeper, tightened his coat around his shoulders and checked the fuel levels for the backup generator. He was supposed to do routine maintenance and leave before sunset, but the storm had other plans. The bridge was flooded, the roads were impassable, and there was no way out until morning. Ethan wasn't worried. He had spent nights in the lighthouse before. He had read about its history, about the tragic deaths that had occurred within its walls. The children who drowned when their cart rolled into the sea, the former lighthouse keepers who had died while on duty. Tourists swore the place was haunted, that figures moved in the windows, that voices whispered through the halls. He never paid attention to ghost stories. As he moved through the lower levels, checking the locks on the heavy wooden doors, something shifted in the air. The temperature dropped so suddenly that his breath fogged in front of him. He frowned and rubbed his hands together. The storm must have knocked something loose in the ventilation. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Not the creak of an old building settling, not the shuffle of rats in the walls. These were deliberate, heavy steps, climbing the spiral staircase. Ethan's stomach tightened. The lighthouse was locked. No one else was supposed to be here. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped cautiously into the main corridor. "Hello," he called. His voice echoed up the tower, swallowed by the endless spirals of metal and stone. Silence. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. It was just the storm playing tricks on him. That was all. He returned to his work, tightening bolts and adjusting the old machinery. A few minutes later, he reached for his wrench, only to find the toolbox empty. He swore under his breath. He had just used it. Where had it gone? A metallic clang rang out from the staircase. Ethan turned sharply, his heart pounding. His wrench lay on the steps, as if someone had just dropped it. He swallowed hard, stepping toward it. The moment his fingers brushed the metal, a whisper drifted through the air. "Not yours." Ethan jerked back, his skin crawling. The voice had been right next to his ear. Spinning around, he shined his flashlight in every direction. Nothing. He forced himself to breathe. He was tired. His mind was playing tricks on him. That was all. Ignoring the unease settling in his gut, he grabbed the wrench and resumed his work. But the lighthouse didn't want to be ignored. The whispers returned, this time circling him, moving just beyond the reach of his light. "Get out. You shouldn't be here." He squeezed his eyes shut. It was just the wind. Just the wind. Then, another sound. A dragging noise, like heavy boots scraping against the floor. Ethan's hands tightened around his flashlight as he slowly turned toward the staircase. At the top stood a figure. A tall, shadowy shape, barely visible against the dim glow of the storm outside. Ethan's breath hitched. His body refused to move. The figure didn't advance, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching. Then, it started coming down. Step by step. Heavy, deliberate. Ethan backed away, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. He grabbed his radio, fumbling to turn it on. "Mayday," he gasped. "This is Ethan Carter at St. Augustine Lighthouse. I need immediate evac. There's someone here." Static. The figure moved closer. Ethan ran. He bolted down the corridors, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. Every turn felt endless. Every shadow stretched too far. The whispers chased him, rising into laughter, into sobs. "You can't leave," they taunted. The main exit loomed ahead. He grabbed the handle and yanked. Locked. He twisted, slammed, kicked. It wouldn't budge. The air behind him grew colder. The presence loomed closer. Ethan turned, and for the first time, he saw it clearly. A man, dressed in an old lighthouse keeper's uniform, his face hollow, his eyes sunken pits of darkness. His lips curled into something that might have once been a smile. "The light must never go out." The specter whispered, "Not even for you." Ethan screamed. Then, darkness. When the Coast Guard arrived the next morning, the storm had calmed, leaving only damp, salty air in its wake. They found Ethan curled in a corner of the lighthouse, eyes wide, face pale, muttering over and over. "The man in the light," he whispered. "He's still there." They took him away, wrapped in blankets, his body ice cold despite the warm morning sun. He never spoke of that night again, and he never returned. But sometimes, when the wind howls against the lighthouse walls, visitors swear they see a figure at the top of the tower, watching, waiting. Just like before,